Hi beautiful, my name is Mina. Welcome to my channel, Mina Reads, and today we're going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag. I always love this little check-in. I love watching everybody else's, so it's just always such a fun time on BookTube, so I'm excited to do mine. Let's get into these questions. So the very first question is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? And my answer is going to have to be A Taste of Golden Iron by Alexandra Rowland. So this is the first book that I finished this year, and it is still the book that has stayed on my mind for the longest. This is a queer fantasy romance, and we're following this prince named Kato, and he is a part of this empire, and essentially his sister is the empress, and so there's kind of some political tension between him and his sister's consort, and he just keeps finding himself getting into a lot of trouble and mishaps and mayhem. So he gets assigned a new bodyguard named Evamir, and this is about him and Evamir hating each other in the beginning, and it goes from like hate to love, bodyguard romance, but it's also a really fun kind of like political, I don't want to say thriller, but like a political mystery, because they are trying to solve this like mystery that's happening in their treasury department, where there's this like magical currency fraud happening. And so there's a little bit of everything going on in this book. It has like a really strong, really beautiful found family dynamic, really interesting world building, beautiful romance between our two protagonists, Evamir and Kato, and it's just so fun. It was just such a great reading experience, and I just think on the reading experience so fondly, like how obsessed I was and how some of the lines and the moments in this book just stuck with me, and I can't wait to reread this. I'm planning my reread soon, and it was just so incredible. I do have a reading vlog where I talk about this because it was just like such a good experience I had to document, but I just loved it. Like, I just love this book so much, and I will continue to sing its praises. I really wish that more people would read this, especially because more people are hopping on the fantasy romance train. Like, this book needs to be on your TBR. Pick it up. I think I've said enough on that subject, so let's move on to the next question. It says, what's the best sequel that you've read this year? And I'm gonna have to say The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is a very, very interesting sci-fi fantasy trilogy. It's full of very complex characters and dynamics. It has one of the most compelling mother-daughter dynamics I've ever read in a book, and I really loved what N.K. Jemisin kind of had to say regarding family and like love, and how sometimes somebody can love you and they're loving you in the wrong way, and how that really can tear you apart. And so I really just love like the mother-daughter dynamic in this. I think that the world and the sort of magic and the power systems and the history, the mythology, I feel like N.K. Jemisin just tackles so many things in such a with such a wide scope, and she just does it well. Like, thematically, on an interpersonal level, the character dynamics are great. Like, it's just a very fantastic, very tightly woven story, and I think that this was a really great conclusion. So I would definitely recommend this trilogy if you have not read it already. It's so good. All right, the next question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. I'm gonna name 3 because I'm very, very behind on all of the hyped releases at the moment. So 1, I still need to really read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Why haven't I read it yet? Couldn't tell you, but I still really need to read that. I'm very curious about what my reaction to that book is going to be. I kind of heard a lot of really polarizing things about it, especially from my mutuals on TikTok. A lot of people really did not like this book, and it's one of their least favorite from Emily Henry, which I thought was so interesting. So I feel like, as much as that intrigues me, it also makes me nervous, but I need to read it so I can form my own opinion on it. I also really want to read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is like a literary fiction satire kind of story that I have not gotten a chance to pick up yet, but I really want to read it, and I'm hoping to read it soon because I am familiar with R.F. Kuang from The Poppy War, and reading that trilogy from her. So I would love to know how she navigates just like general contemporary like literary fiction. I'm really excited to see that side of her as a writer, so I do need to check that one out. And finally, I really want to read Fourth Wing, which is a fantasy romance that everybody and their mother's been talking about. I really love dragon fantasy, and yeah, everyone just seems to really love this book. Everyone says that they've had so much fun reading it, and I want to have so much fun reading it. The only thing is that I have been a little bit crazy with my book buying habits this year, and I really do not have new book money. Okay, like, I don't have new book money. It's simply not in the budget. So I am at the whims of my public library system, and the wait for the Fourth Wing ebook is like 12 weeks. So I will see y'all. I will catch up with y'all in a few months, okay? but I will read this book as soon as I possibly can because I'm just too curious about it. Next question. My most anticipated release for the second half of the year definitely has to be He Who Drowned the World, second book in the She Who Became the Sun. I think it's going to be a trilogy. I'm not 100% sure, but it was a while ago. I read that book and I really loved it. And I thought the main character, Zhu Zhengbao, is one of the most fascinating fantasy protagonists that I have ever read from. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where this story is going to progress for our main character Zhu, and also for our like secondary protagonist, General Ouyang. I'm so fascinated by him and where he's going, and I just think that this series is going to be so amazing. So if you like political fantasy, I'd highly recommend checking this book out. It was just so great. And I think He Who Drowned the World is coming out in August, I want to say, and I'm very excited to read it. Biggest disappointment this year. Ciao, I have a few. Number one, for me, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, this was a huge disappointment. I don't want to say flat out that this is like the worst book that I've ever read, but I just feel like the discussion around this book really made it seem like my life was going to change and my heart was going to be broken and shattered into pieces when I read it, and I just really did not have that experience with it. I'm not going to tell you that it's a bad book. I'm not going to say that if you love this book, if it tore you limb from limb, that you're wrong. I'm not going to say that, but I'm just going to say that I didn't have that experience with it, and I'm very disappointed by it. I wanted it to fuck me up. I wanted to be really emotional about it, and I just wasn't. I just read the book and felt very ambivalent about the whole thing. And yeah, like I hate that. I hate when you read a book and you just close it and you feel nothing, and that's kind of how I felt with this book. And I wanted to feel all of the things, and I wanted to be really emotional. And the main reason that I ended up picking this up was I saw someone on TikTok like literally sobbing, like it was that serious. They were just sobbing, mascara running. I mean, it was a very intense cry, and I wanted that for me. Like, I wanted a book that was really going to move me deeply, and this just didn't. It was just very much blah, very much didn't give. My next huge disappointment is definitely The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I read The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia in 2021, and I love that book so much. I have had very like mixed results with Sylvia's work. I wasn't the hugest fan of Mexican Gothic. I love The Beautiful Ones, one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I really enjoyed Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and this was like my next pickup from Sylvia, hoping that it would be another hit, and it just really was not. So this is a retelling of The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, and I have to say that I just really did not like this book. I feel like it just didn't do enough with the concept. I felt like we have this idea of this woman growing up, or not even a woman, she's like barely a teenager, barely out of her teen years at the start of this book, and she is living on this isolated island with her mad scientist father and like this creepy older dude that's in love with her, and also all of these like animal hybrid creatures. And there's a lot of like thematic stuff going on here about like workers' rights and indigenous people and indigenous labor being taken advantage of, and like the ethics of certain kinds of science and things like that. And I just feel like there's so many deeply interesting themes in here that Sylvia Moreno Garcia does almost nothing with. And then I feel like the characters are just so paper thin. Their dynamics are so deeply uninteresting, and I think that Sylvia Moreno Garcia definitely has a fetish for like age gap relationships, and I feel like sometimes it gives like, I get it girl, you know, we love a silver fox, but sometimes it's just giving creepy. And it gave me the ick super duper bad with the pathetic down bad dude that was in this, because he was a grown ass man who watched the main character Carlotta grow up. She was literally like 10 years old when he first met her, and he's been thinking about how beautiful she is the whole fucking time. He gave me the heebie-jeebies bad. So it just like everything that this book could have been, it didn't do well, and I hated it. It pissed me off so much that I didn't love this book. I really wanted to. I thought the concept was so fucking cool, an author that I'm really enamored with, but this book just did not give what needed to be gave at all. And the final book that I'm gonna say is Saga Volume 10. I hated this. I gave it 1 star. I think it may be one of the only books that I can like firmly remember giving 1 star this year, but I hated it. Some stuff happens in volume 9 of Saga that really irrevocably changes the series and the direction that it's going to be in, and the character dynamics that we're going to get to experience, and I understand that. I think that volume 9 was like very wild and crazy and emotional and whatever, but I think that where volume 10 opens up, it just made me realize that I do not care about anything that's going to happen in Saga moving forward. I absolutely am deeply uninterested, and I feel like the humor, which has always been a little bit on the edgy side, is just, it's gone like full on cringe, and I hate it, and it's just like just bad and weird, and it's too much shock value comedy happening for me to appreciate whatever is going on in it, and I truly don't care about the characters. And I'm sad to say this because this is going to make me sound like a bad person, but I really don't give a damn about the little girl that is narrating the story. Like, I know that it's her story, and she does narrate the entire series up to this point, but she's a baby in most of the other installments, and in this one she's like, in this one and a few of the other ones, she is like a real person at this point, you know, because she's like a kid, but she's getting older, and so she's more of a character in her own right, like making choices that are informing the story. And I just don't care. I don't really care for following like child protagonists all that much. So it's just like everything that I even remotely gave a damn about in previous installments of the series is gone, and so I will not be reading any more of Saga. But we had a really good run. We really did. And that's okay. All good things come to an end. Now let's talk about something nice. What was the biggest surprise of the year? My biggest surprise of the year was definitely The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. And I feel like I heard a decent amount about this book a few years ago on BookTube. I feel like people on like Fantasy BookTube were talking about this book closer to when it released. It released maybe in 2017 or something like that. And I feel like it had a little bit of buzz back then, but I didn't hear anything about it that really made me want to pick it up. But one of my mutuals, Deanna, she really loved this book, and she bought this book for me for my birthday last year. And so I finally got around to picking it up in, I want to say like maybe March or April or something like that, and I absolutely fell deeply in love with this. So this is a fantasy standalone, and we're following this character named Maya, who is like the 4th or 5th son of this emperor, but the emperor never favored his mother, and so therefore never favored him, and Maya has been living on his own with this abusive cousin for the majority of his life after his mother passes away. He's completely shunned by the royal family, and so he's just living in isolation, very sad, and you know, just a very, very sad boy, pretty much. And this horrible tragedy befalls the emperor and all of his other sons. They're in like an airship accident. This is a steampunk fantasy, by the way, so there's like some interesting technology stuff going on. So the father and the other sons are in this airship accident, and so Maya very quickly becomes the new emperor of this nation, and he has to kind of navigate the political landscape that he has never been invited into because he was this like shunned son, and he has no experience with being in the palace, with dealing with politics. And this is really about him trying to maneuver his way through that social space and learning to be a good leader, and all of the people around him that are trying to help him navigate this like huge shift in power. And it was just so good. I think if you like political fantasy, you will really appreciate this because it really dives into kind of the minutia of like organizing a change in a political regime, sort of kind of, but it's also like really moving because Maya is one of the best, most lovable protagonists that I have read about maybe ever, and I just loved him so deeply, and I felt so connected to him, and I just did not expect that at all. And I feel like I said, I have heard so little about this series, so I'm glad that I finally picked it up because I had no expectations going into it, and I just absolutely loved it. Like, it just was so fantastic to me, and it gave me so many things that I didn't know that I wanted or needed from a fantasy, and I just loved it. Okay, another surprise read for me this year was Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chupeco. I absolutely adored this fantasy. This is a like vampire hunter fantasy where we're following a character named Remy, who is the son of a duke, but he is also a vampire hunter, and he ends up caught up in a relationship with these 2 vampires, and this is like a poly-romantic situation between them. But this is also a like really gruesome, gory, like action fantasy where they are fighting their way through the countryside as they're trying to figure out what is going on with this vampire mutation that is happening, where all of these monsters are popping up and they're killing like huge swaths of the population. They're trying to figure out what's going on as vampires and humans try to create this treaty together. These monsters that are cropping up are causing some political tension, and so Remy and his new vampire paramours are kind of trying to figure out what's going on there. This book, I have not heard anyone talking about it, at least not with the amount of hype, with the amount of vigor and vim that the book really deserves. So I need more people to read this. Okay, it's fun, it's sexy, it's violent, it's giving. The girls need to read it, especially if you already are a fan of like Castlevania. It just has those vibes so strongly. Like, you need to read this. You have to do it for yourself. But if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for me. It's so good. You don't want to miss out. It's delicious. Also, the audiobook is really good. So if you're more of an audiobook girly, grab it on audio. It's fantastic. Okay, the next question is favorite new to me author. I think I'm gonna have to go with Natasha Bishop for this one. So I very recently read Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop, and I believe this is her 4th book now, and I have heard about her for a few months now, but I decided to pick up Only for the Week because it just seemed like the perfect summer romance, and it definitely is. I gave this book 5 stars, and it was one of the easiest 5 stars I have ever given out for a romance. I just felt like it was such a well-crafted romance in the sense that it's really juggling a lot of different things, right? Because it's like a spicy romance, but it's also really like emotionally heavy, as we have our main character Janelle dealing with a really complicated familial dynamic between her and her mother and her and her sister. The way that that relationship is handled and navigated is so well executed, in addition to how absolutely fantastic the relationship between her and her love interest Rome is. Rome is one of the book boyfriends of all time, and I just felt like the book was so perfectly juggling like a really serious, like, emotional journey for our protagonist Janelle, but also like a really beautiful, really sweet, really tender romance. It was also very spicy in a way that didn't feel super cringe and forced. I feel like the more that I read spicy romances, the more that I feel like authors are writing spice for shock value so that they can get like clicks and views on TikTok, and this didn't feel like that to me. It just felt like tenderness and intimacy, and it was beautiful and it was hot and I loved it. And then I also felt like this book was also really funny, and it juggled like a lot of drama and silliness, and because this is a vacation romance and is set at like a destination wedding, so there's a huge cast of side characters that we also encounter, and I just felt like the author handled all of those elements so deftly. Like, the side characters were really interesting, fleshed out people. The main couple was fantastically well developed. The emotional journey for Janelle was really fantastic, and it just felt like such a good book, and I can't wait to read more from this author in the future. So yeah, I definitely think that she's going to be on my new favorite authors list. I do have to check out her previous books as soon as possible, but I am so pleasantly surprised with her. So definitely she is a new favorite author for me. I highly would recommend reading Only for the Week, and yeah, I'm just very excited to see what else she has and if it's going to give on the same level that this book does. All right, next question is newest fictional crush. I'm going to give you a few because I always do. Now, what I will say before I give you the fictional crushes is that as a card-carrying member of the Alphabet Mafia, I may need my membership revoked because there are no women on this list, which is very sad and very criminal on my part. All right, so we've got Dominic from Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. He is the man of all time. He is a certified munch. I love him. I need him. I want him. He is everything. If you want to read about a super duper down bad man who is wildly, madly, passionately obsessed with his love interest, you need to read Restore Me. Dominic is everything. I love him. I need him. I want him so badly. But more importantly, he needs me. Then we have to talk about Pi from Yours Insatiably by Aveda Vice. This is a monster romance. Pi is like a Mothman fae person who uses any pronouns, and they are beautiful and sexy and amazing. I love them, and they're so hot. They're so hot, it defies logic and reason. And Aveda Vice made me realize so many things about myself reading this particular monster romance. And Pi, I would sacrifice my dignity. I would do something strange just for a few minutes with him. I am not kidding. Like, Pi is, he is so near and dear to me, okay? The next book boyfriend I have to tell you about, Reese from Twisted Games. Bitch, have you guys read Twisted Games? Bodyguard romance, contemporary like royalty bodyguard romance. Listen, the crawl to me scene, this scene in the throne room, the scene where he saves her when she fell off the damn horse, I love him. He's everything. Why did nobody tell me about him? Like, everybody in their mother talks about the Twisted series. They're like, oh, the Twisted series is so good and Huang is so this and that. Like, okay, but why didn't y'all tell me about Reese specifically? Like, I would have read the series so long ago if I knew about him, and nobody told me. Like, y'all are not real. Yeah, great stuff, great stuff. All right, we've done enough being down bad for fictional characters. Let's move on to the next question. Oh, the next question is my newest favorite character. How funny. My new favorite character definitely is Maya. I've already kind of waxed poetic about him, but I just feel like he's such a sweet character, and I feel like it's not very often that I read a fantasy book that is about a character that is just so good. Like, at their core, they're just such a good, decent person that you see other people like choosing decency because of how good a person that they are and how strong their strength of character is. And that's the kind of character that Maya is, and that's what he brings out in other characters in the story. And he just inspires like this devotion and loyalty, and I just loved him. I felt like he was just so great. And it's not often that I read a character that is like so good and I love them for that. I feel like typically I like, you know, like a bad boy character. I like somebody that has a dark and tragic past, and Maya's past is definitely dark and tragic, but it is very beautiful that he chooses to lead with kindness instead of, you know, harshness, despite what he has been through in his life. And I just feel like usually, like I said, I would go for the dark and broody type, and I feel like Maya is such a departure from that, and I loved him. He just was really, really incredible on so many different levels. So yeah, Maya's my baby. All right, a book that made me cry. So I haven't had too many reading experiences that really like changed me over the course of this year, but I will say that I read They Can't Kill Us Till They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib, and this book was incredible. This is an essay collection, and Hanif is kind of like a pop culture writer, and so he writes a lot on music and different artists and like concert review type stuff. The essay topics are kind of wide ranging in terms of the artists that they cover and the themes of each, but one thing that really stood out to me in this is that Hanif really talks about how music and his love of music has helped him create and maintain a lot of friendships. And he talks about this one friendship that he had with a friend who passed away, who took his own life, and how they used to both be ginormous fans of Fall Out Boy. And so this particular essay is called Fall Out Boy Forever, and it's about them going to like one of the very first shows that Fall Out Boy ever held, and like them seeing that show and them being like really devoted fans in the early days of Fall Out Boy, like gaining momentum as a band, and just like the really beautiful and relationship that Hanif had with this person. And it was just so heartbreaking and moving, and I just felt like Hanif's writing was so incredible, and the whole essay collection is incredible, but that particular essay really shook me to my core, and it just was so, it was so incredibly beautiful, and I definitely cried. I cried a whole lot reading that essay collection. Actually, it's very good. I think that there's something that you could take away from it, even if you aren't a huge fan of music or even the type of music that Hanif is a fan of, because some of the artists that he talks about in it I don't care that much for, but I think that like the personal connections that he makes and the lyricism of his writing is like very poetic. I think that I just loved it, and it was just so great, and I would highly recommend it if you have not read it already. It's great nonfiction, so you need to read it. A book that made me happy, definitely gonna have to go with Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This is a YA romance, and y'all know me, I'm not really much of a YA girly. I have very much outgrown that age category, I feel, But I read this just kind of because I love Talia Hibbert that much and I trust her that much, and I'm glad that I did because this was such a sweet, heartwarming young adult romance, and I just really loved these characters. I loved their relationship and I just felt like it was so sweet and it was so fun, and I would love to see this get adapted at some point soon because it just was adorable and it was so funny and I love it. The most beautiful book that I bought this year definitely has to be The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. I'm not sure like how well you're going to be able to see the detail and intricacy that is on this cover, but it is absolutely incredible. You know, it's like this ship and then there's like a huge sea monster that's like enveloping the ship, and the detail in this and like the colors, it is just so beautiful and I love it, and it just so perfectly fits the story, and it's an incredible cover. I'm unsure who the cover designer is, but they did an absolutely fantastic job, and I'm really excited to see what the sequel cover is gonna look like. But yeah, this book cover is just so amazing. The book is also really fun, but the book cover, shining star, fantastic. And the last question is, what are some books that you still need to read by the end of the year? I really want to read Hostile Takeover by Christina C. Jones. This is like one of her most recent releases, and y'all know that Christina C. Jones is one of my favorite romance authors of all time, but I haven't read a book by her at all this year, and so I need to do that. This Hostile Takeover book, I know that it is like a billionaire romance and it's like an arranged marriage trope. I think I enjoy the arranged marriage trope or marriage of convenience or whatever. I enjoy that. Any type of like, we have to get married, we have to be together, but we grow to love each other. I don't know why, but it's going to do it for me every single time, so I can't wait to read this. And I also really want to read Serpent and the Wings of Night by I think it's Clarissa Broadbent. I think that's the author's name. I've heard a whole lot about this author recently, and so I want to read this book, and everyone was reading this a little bit earlier in the year, so I know I'm late, but better late than never. And yeah, I want to read that. I think it'll be a good time, so that's on my list. Another one that's on my list is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I keep hearing about this book as well. I think this is another fantasy romance, and this is about like some people who are writing letters to each other through like an enchanted what is it called, typewriter? Yeah, they're like talking to each other through an enchanted typewriter, and I love letters. I love when letters are used, particularly in like a romantic story. It's going to do it for me every single time, so I can't wait to read this. And I just noticed that it's on Kindle Unlimited, so we will be reading it very soon. So yeah, that is my mid-year freakout tag. Let me know what your best books of the year are. Let me know what some of your biggest disappointments were so far this year. I'm excited to see your responses in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye you guys. Mwah.